Okay, so this is a recent pickup of mine, Vinci. I've played it a couple of times back in the 90s, maybe even early 2000. A friend of mine had it. It struck me as an interesting game, so I wanted to pick it up, and when I saw it used at an auction at a reasonable price, I grabbed it. My understanding of Small World is very similar to this, although more intricate in terms of how the different aspects relate. This is pretty much a pure Euro, by my view of Euros. And although it does have player conflict, etc., it very much fits my feeling towards that type. However, I enjoyed it, so I'm going to give it a look-see here. Now, let's take a look at the basic rules of the game. We'll look into the details of the chits as we come up with the civilization chits as we come up with it. But the concept is you start with 10 victory points. You're trying to get to a certain amount. In 5 or 6 players, and I'm playing in 6 of course, the goal is to reach 100 victory points. And then of course you just wrap around just like any other Euro style game. So you're trying to run along this track, and you score your points for these empires that you start. And you're allowed to have one sort of active empire on the board at a time, and your immediately preceding empire, if it still survives, counts as an in decline empire, and that can give you points too. And it has these little white chits. Yeah, not those. To mark that it's not your active empire. If you send your active empire into decline, your declining empire disappears. I'll go into how this works. So at the beginning of the game, there's this, first of all, there's these little tan chits. Those are neutral forces on every territory. Those kind of clear up as you go. There's also a bag here full of these civilization chits. And you draw at random a couple of them for 6 different slots. And those are paired up. There's, I believe, 26 different types of chits. And I don't want to try to figure out the combinatorics on this. But there's a lot of different options of civilizations that come with these pairs of chits. The number on the chit, the red number, is how many little pieces you get to have. And you can't eat these. They're made of wood. Plus, so you get the sum of the value of the two things. So this will give you 5 plus 5 is 10, plus a certain amount for the number of players in the game. And in 6 players, I believe that's 3 extra tokens. But in 3 players, that goes up to 8 extra tokens, which, allows the board to be about equally full, as a kludge for that. Now, at the beginning of the game, each player has to select a civilization first. And this actually fits well with the pattern of the game. This is the equivalent of going into decline and getting a new civilization. You don't have anything on the board, so the rest of the decline rules don't apply, but you get to pick a civilization. And the way that's done is if you pick the first one in the option, you just get it. But if you want to pick one of the later ones, you have to pay victory points, and it's 2 victory points per later one, and you mark those with little chits, and then you also pay the victory points off your tile. Now, what that means is if someone else buys one of the ones with victory points on it, they get not only the civilization, but they get the victory points that this represents. That's a very Euro-ish feel to it there. Okay, as each civilization is picked up, they all move down towards the cheap end of things, and then you draw 2 new ones to go in the 6th slot. Okay, now when you start a civilization, or if you have one on the board, you take a certain kind of turn, and basically there's 2 different kinds of turns. You can either take an expansion turn, which is what you start out with, and what you have whenever you're running an active empire, or you can basically pass a turn to start a new empire. All right, let's go over, although we went over much of what happens in terms of passing a turn, I might as well go over that first, I guess, even though it's second. So the first thing you do is, if you have an empire already in decline, you remove all its pieces from the board. Then you reduce your previous empire to 1 piece per territory and mark it with little in decline markers. You return the civilization tiles that that empire has to the bag. They become available for a new draw. Then you score your victory points. And you get victory points per area you have. Pretty much it's 1 per area base, except for mountain areas, which aren't worth anything. But you can see there's these little anchors and pickaxes, and some civilizations get bonuses for different kinds of areas. You will not likely get that once you're in decline, though. And then you choose your new civilization, and that's done just the same way as in the first one. Okay, so what happens when you have an active empire? Well, that follows a similar setup, which is you collect your tokens, which could be your starting tokens if you're just bringing them on the board, or if they're already on the board, you can just collect up whatever they have. Now, when you're first attacking, or if you've been knocked off the board and you still have tokens, you pick an area to attack. And the restrictions on areas to attack are, let me see what they are. The first province, it can certainly be any province directly on the edge of the board, but it also can be adjacent to one of the oceans, but I think there's a limit to which oceans it can be. A land province that can be reached by crossing only 1 dark blue sea area. So for example, if I was here, if I wanted to enter through here, I could move to this province as my first province. Or I could move to this one, but I couldn't move into here because that would be crossing 2 dark blue seas. As an example. Now, that first province I have to attack to get, and I'll explain how that happens in a moment. But I can spread out over adjacent provinces in a contiguous fashion until I've conquered as many provinces as I can or wish to. And then I'm allowed to reorganize all my tokens. And I have to make sure that my empire, if it's an active empire, is still cohesive. It all connects to itself, to its pieces. And finally, I count my victory points, and I get points for my empire that's active, as well as my empire in decline. For expansion, basically I just pay a certain amount of tokens to take an area. And that cost is listed here. It's 2 for the province base, plus 1 if I'm attacking forest or mountains. Forest, mountains, pretty clear. Plus 1 for every neutral, and these are all neutrals, or enemy token that's sitting in the province. And there might be more than 1 if it's not an in-decline empire. And then I get a bonus of 1 off if I'm attacking out of the mountains. It's a little cheaper. I may also get bonuses from some of my civ tiles, which is, it could actually reduce the price to take a province to 0, in which case I can take it without expending any pieces. Okay, so however many pieces I use to expand into a province, I have to pay by putting them in that province. So say it cost me 3 to take this, and I don't know why it would, but, well, let's take an actual example. Let's say I want to take Ireland. Okay, and let's say that's my first province. Well, it's going to cost me, and I have a handful of pieces at this point. It's going to cost me 1 for the province. 2 for the province. I lie already. 1 for the neutral piece, 1 for the forest, and that's it. And that kills 1 defending piece. If there are any others as part of an empire, they can retreat to another area of that empire. And that doesn't have to be contiguous spaces. All right. After I finish all my conquering, after I've used up all my attacks, I'm allowed to reorganize my pieces for defense, but I still have to maintain a contiguous territory. And then I score my points, and my points, as I've already said, are basically 1 per area except for mountain areas. Let's take a look at some of the starting options that are out there. So one of them is messages and astronomy. And I'll go more into this in a little bit as to what happens. But astronomy. Conquest can be done via sea zones. Provinces in the empire are adjacent when connected by sea zones. So that would allow a crossing through, and they would be considered adjacent. I believe that only means 1 sea zone. I can't go boom, boom, boom with that. And let's take a look at messages. This is just to see what some of these do. The empire can ignore the rule of cohesion. That means that I can allow my empire to be split apart. Now, an empire in decline can be split apart anyway. So that's not a bad set of pieces, and somebody will probably pick that up. I'll look at some of the others as they're chosen and some of the reasons for that in the first turn. I just want to give you the idea of what these powers kind of entail. Some of them are very cool. Some of them will last even for your declining empire. A few of the yellow ones do that. All right, let's send this one up, and then I'll start rocking into the game.